Hey guys, it's a big day for Netrunner. So the new Most Wanted list has come out, and it's the biggest change to the game since probably the game came out. First line here says that all AstroScript limit 1 per deck. So AstroScript has been a meta-defining card, in fact almost a game-defining card since the core set. It was the reason to buy 2 core sets. You get all 3 Astros, and then a lot of runner decks just got kept out of the game by not being fast enough to keep up with AstroScript. So with AstroScript gone, or at least severely limited, sure, you can still play 1 Astro, you can still fast track for it, but the days of going like Astro breaking news are over. And that's going to let a lot of runner decks that were too slow in the past have a chance to come in. So I'm really curious to see what people do with the space opened up with that. And Museum of History is unique, and that's pretty cool. I don't think it's going to do a whole ton by itself. You can still have all 3 on the board, and then if they trash one, you res the second one. The main impact of this is that with museum decks, they can no longer keep their R&D density low forever. So every time they click to draw, or they otherwise play more cards with their R&D, they're only putting 1 back in per turn. So the R&D size will shrink like that. And like the kind of genomics decks or Gagarin deck, where they might have before felt like they had the entire game to just do whatever and they could never lose because of the museums. Now they're on a clock again, at least to some extent. You know, the museum shuffle is only going to get rid of the mandatory draw. Everything else they do is going to tick down their R&D. So it's definitely a great change. I like this change a lot. I think we're still going to see museum decks, especially with the new NBN ID coming out, which is pretty gross with museums. So another good change I really like. Most Wanted list. So Anarch just got completely gutted with David, Faust, and Wildside all making it. So that would be as much as 8 influence off a typical Wizard deck. We're going to see Wizard probably not viable in his existing form. Really, you have to keep these 2 cards, I think, because your alternate breaker suite is the same reason Anarch was bad for such a long time, is that they weren't able to assemble like 3 different kinds of breaker. So your barrier, code gate, and sentry. As a result of their weak draw deck. Now their draw is better, but still you'd much rather have Faust to break everything than get a set of breakers. So I think we'll see probably these stay and you'll just pay for them. Wildside is probably gone now. I don't know if you can support spending 3 more influence when there are plenty of other draw options in Anarch. You know, you've got Inject, I've Had Worse, Street Peddler, Making an Entrance, you've got Earthrise Hotel. Like, you're not lacking for draw. So my impression is that Wildside will start to go away and we'll see the other 2 remain. And breaking news, kind of unnecessary, I think. Really, if you've nuked Astro, making us pay influence for breaking news is a little bit over the top, but it's fine, I guess. He's maybe looking more towards the 24/7 decks that are wanting to pack a ton of Scorches and still have breaking news. I think most decks will still play breaking news. It's probably the best agenda in the game now that Astro is limited. There's just so much tag punishment these days that just putting on the table and not advancing it, and then doing 2 advancing and a closed accounts or an all-seeing eye, or an exchange. Like, there's so many game-breaking plays you can do with this card that I think we're going to see breaking news not drop in popularity at all. And in fact, we might even see more of it, because with AstroScript limited, NBN is really getting, I would say, pinned into the tagging faction rather than the fast advanced faction. So they've got a lot of different tag punishment options, a lot of ways to give tags. So I think they're going to become maybe what Lucas intended in the first place, a lot of tag-based play coming out of NBN. So probably wasn't needed, but I don't mind this change either. And Mamba Temple, definitely a good change. This card was just over the power curve from the beginning. If getting 2 recurring credits, twice as good as what you get out of a pad campaign. Only 1 to res is really low. And they can res each other. You can res Sands. It had this kind of chilling effect where if you had a temple on the board, the runner wouldn't want to run at all because they just be giving you like heavily discounted ice. And so that meant that the temple would sit there. Maybe there's a cheap ice in front of it so you can't trash it, or maybe you just don't want to pay to trash it. And it would totally shut down people from checking your other servers. So it's a really strong card. It was really warping. Also really warping in museum decks because you could search it with the Mummet City Hall. Getting 3 of these on the board meant you could actually afford like toll booths or hives or whatever expensive ice you wanted to. And it's just too much. So I think we'll see this being cut from the decks where it wasn't a key component. Like a lot of NEH would have it just as an extra econ card. And you probably won't do that anymore. But I think if there's museum decks still left, they have to still play Temple. It's just too much synergy with the Mummet City Hall to cut that. And it's also key to their econ source of being a recurring source that lasts forever. So overall, pretty good changes. I'm going to look at some runner decks about just some quick thoughts. I'll maybe do a separate video for the Corp ones because Corp play is going to change a lot, I think. And not only for the changes to itself, but also the changes to the runner side, which I think are going to be pretty dramatic. So first of all, I'm going to bring up Wizard with Wild Side. And you notice he now has like 4 influence. It's pretty crazy. You want to play your Wild Side, you want to play your Faust, Parasite, David. Like you're losing a ton of influence. And I think this deck is still kind of okay. Like you don't have any clone chips, but the clone chips were always more of a nice to have than a need to have. And you are able to play Grimoire again because now with only 1 Astro, I think the turntable is less important. Like it's still a good card. Maybe you want it just to handle Nisei tokens or like efficiency committees. But Grimoire certainly is going to give you the extra medium counter and make you able to melt ice pretty quickly. So I wouldn't say the Wild Cakes deck is completely dead, but I would like to be exploring different options for what you can do to get away from having just 4 influence. 3 of which basically has to be Levy. I don't think you can cut Levy these days when you're burning your deck with Faust all the time. So really you've got like 1 flex influence. You could play a few different cards in this slot, but just an extra money is fine. So what else can you do with Wizard if you're not going to do this wild side business? Well, you can take the pancakes out and you can play all of the other draws. So you can play Peddler, Earthrise. These are both great cards that just didn't fit into a normal wild side shell, but once you're not playing wild side, now you can play, draw 6 is a lot of cards, and it even comes in over the course of 3 turns where you're not going to discard too much. And Peddler is just an amazing card, especially when you can get a Parasite on there and just flip it over mid-run. Get the breaker you need and flip it over when you need it and not before that. Pretty great. So if you go and cut your wild sides, now you're able to play a clone chip again if that's what you really want. The clone chip I think is still quite good. If you go against a Kamainu, you don't want to discard your whole hand or like pay even like 6 to break his Mimic. It's kind of bad either way. You want to instantly kill that Kamainu. And you can kill bigger ice too with a sucker component. I think you need to keep David, like I mentioned. There's really no other good way to go through like a couple Turings. Or even like a toll booth on a remote. Or Lotus, like a Lotus Field you can use the Yogg for if you have net ready eyes. Which we don't here. I don't think you can fit net ready eyes that easily. So this Yogg might not even be needed, but with the Grimoire, you do that extra MU, you can play other programs in there. So I think this is probably going to play fine, and if you're used to playing Wizard, you'll pick up pretty easily on this. It's basically the same kind of cards, but you have to actually continuously replenish your hand, rather than just getting free cards for the entire game. The other option is to go for like a Desperado build, and not play Faust. So this kind of wizard-based Anarch Breaker deck has been around for a long time, but the issue early in the game's history was that you couldn't find your breakers in time without any tutoring options. So Criminals had special order, and your Shapers had SMC. Anarch stuck just drawing like a chump to try to find 3 different breakers, and often you spend half the game blocked out by like a Enigma because you didn't find your 1 Yogg or whatever. And now you've really got a lot of draw, like copious amounts of draw. You can even put more draw in this if you want to. You've got Making an Entrance. You can look at the top 6 cards, and if they're all not Yogg, just trash all 6 of them. It's fine. You can play your Peddler again, your Earthrise. So a deck like this is certainly good if you're going to go up against a lot of open remotes where you just want to check all of them. And being able to play Net Ready Eyes in this kind of list is kind of fun because you're going to be saving money on breaking, Eli's if you want to do that. Or you're just going to be able to break ice you couldn't break otherwise. So you can get through that Lotus Field. With a Sucker, you can get through the Turing or the Toll Booth, whatever you want to do. It could be a good time for Yogg. People are starting to play more and more code gates because criminals can't really break code gates that well. And there's a lot of big code gates that were resistant to Faust. So having a Yogg in your deck, I could see it surprising some people and being like almost like a really good parasite that blanks like, 2 Enigmas at once. So Destro is a fun card. If you haven't played this kind of aggressive build, it's definitely more aggro than a normal wizard deck. The other ones you're more sitting back and building up, and this one you're trying to poke for accesses really early, trying to get some weaknesses, and you've got the Vamp option to clean out the remote server. So if they try to do a Caprice play, odds are you can Vamp them to 0, and then you just run the remote and pick some stuff up. I think Vamp will be a power card in the upcoming meta. As we start to see more slower decks coming out on Corpse side, because you can't really go as fast with the Astro stuff, then being able to take all the Corpse money is a pretty hard to argue with. It's going to beat a lot of things. So that's where I think Anarch is. I think Wizard's still probably the best idea. I think Noise is just completely gutted right now. I don't know how you can play Noise. Maybe someone will show me the way. But he was really the deck that wanted the wild side the most, and now he's going to have no influence to play clone chips and stuff. Val is fine. I think Val is basically the same as this. At this point, if you want to do the Rebirth Val thing, it's really not much different than playing Wizard. You just add some blackmails and some more draw cards and you're done. So I don't think Val brings anything significantly different to the table than what Wizard does. So on to Criminal. Criminal's kind of been not doing so hot lately. And probably a big part of that is that they can have a slower setup to find all their breakers, and if during that time Ambient scores like a couple Astros, it's pretty hard to stop them from just scoring out with Astro, because Criminal has had no anti-fast advance that works very well for a long time. But now that you're not going to lose right away to wrap around plus an Astro, you have time to set up your stuff. So Stealth starts to look pretty good. You can get your Switchblade in here and break all these Ichis and stuff really efficiently, break Assassins really efficiently. A lot of decks are counting on having Taxing Sentries to do some work, and you can just completely negate that with Switchblade, so I like that card a lot. Again, I'm on the Yogg with Net Ready Eyes. Feel like you can get these free runs, and that it's even better with Yogg because you can get your free security testing runs. So maybe they did put down an Enigma or a Quandary on their archives and they were covering it, but if you can get them for free again, it suddenly re-enables your testing, which is the key econ source for criminals. Also, Turning Wheel is in a good place right now. I think you can use this with your legwork to see the whole hand, or even just build up for a while and then go for a big R&D dig when it's important to do so. Good card to have in here. So I don't know if this deck is quite there, but it's certainly looking better compared to the Anarch decks that just got hit for 5 to 8 influence. Also, you can play Au revoir, so this is another deck that did not get touched at all by the changes. And this was pretty good, although part of its advantage was being good against Museum, and if Museum goes away, there's a bit less reason to play this. But I'm not convinced Museum will go away. I think we may still see people playing it in seriousness. And there could even be this counterintuitive thing where now that it's worse, people want to play it more. Not positive about that, but some people will just refuse to play decks because they're too popular or they're too perceived as overpowered. They want to win with weaker decks. So there's certainly a type of person that would say Museum just got nerfed a lot. Now I want to play those and figure out how I can still win with it. So we'll see how the count goes for Museum, but this is still a fun deck. There's quite a bit of stuff you can do to counter it, so it's a bit more fragile than other decks, but when it gets going, it really gets going. And generally it was good against any kind of slow deck. You had time to do your thing and just click for 3 all the time. And you had your political operatives to smash caprices. A lot of slower decks couldn't really keep up with you just getting like 20 turning wheel counters. So with less trouble from NEH, this gets correspondingly better. So I do like where this deck is positioned right now. Give it a try if you haven't. So the other criminal would be Geist, and Geist has always been a deck where he was pretty good across the board, except he would lose to NEH, and that's maybe an opening right now for him. So with Geist, you've got, of course, all these breaking entering breakers that are really efficient against most ice, and you get a bunch of them down, you're breaking like 4 strength or 5 strength ice, actually getting paid for it. Pretty great feeling. And the off-campus apartment engine is actually very efficient when you've got all these random connections lying around. So I think this deck has just got a huge boost from not losing to Astro all the time. And the medium is all you need for R&D punishment. As far as like multi-access goes, you can play RDIs, you can play like indexing and stuff, but medium is like this threat that sits on the table and doesn't go away, and it's just always there, and they can't really ignore it. So I really like playing a medium in criminal. I think it's maybe your best choice right now, certainly better than like Keyhole, and cheaper than RDI as well. Geist has the MU for sure because of the Cloud Breakers, so it's good for him. This deck is probably in good shape right now, at least compared to yesterday. Leela also is another deck that didn't get touched, so all these criminals, no effect from the most wanted list changes. So these are just lists that have been sitting around for a while and weren't quite there, but now that they're somewhere higher. So Leela's always been good at punishing bad starts from the corp. If they don't get their econ or they don't get their ice, you can do disgusting things to them. And it's the same kind of thing here. You're going to be set with your political operative. You can contest remotes. You can just load Katie forever. And if we're going to see more Glacier Corps, then Katie Jones gets to be a very good card. You can just put 12 or 15 on her and she doesn't get sniped by breaking news. Pretty happy with that. So if you like Leela, definitely dust her off and try her again. I don't think the gang sign is necessarily the way to go these days. There's a lot of ways for corps to play around it, but if you just do like kind of a money and breakers thing and like kind of outplay your opponent, this deck can definitely pick up games. And finally, the Shapers. I think Shapers are probably now the best faction. And maybe I'll get proven wrong with that, but my intuition is that Shapers were already close to or as good as Anarch, and now they're just definitely better than Anarch, and probably just the strongest faction by a margin. So the sort of Kate deck with the Hyperdriver and Proco, you are vulnerable to playing the Proco lottery. To some extent, you get your Proco turn 1, you're really happy. You just click it like 30 times, draw your whole deck, and you're good. If you don't get it, you're kind of a little bit sad. And if it dies, you're a little bit sad too. But most of the time, you're going to get a ton of value. You can get Hyperdriver down the board really early on with your Kate discount and just Proco all day. Proco till you win, right? And now I think it's just going to be allowed to cut Clot, because the Corp's not going to know if you have Clot or not for a while. And if you can get those 2 influence back, you can play some other mean cards like Vamp. I know I'm pushing Vamp here, but I think Vamp is in a fantastic place in a Glacier meta where it's not just like NBN decks scoring with your shipment from Sansa off $0. Most decks now, if they have $0, they're just not doing anything for a while. So I think Vamp is a great choice. Any deck that can make a little bit of extra money. So like late game, you might have this Tech Rider with like $15 on it. So pop that Tech Rider for 15 and go Vamp them. Be good times. So I think this Kate deck was already tier 1, and now it's maybe going to be a new era of like tons of Kates everywhere, tons of Shaper play, and like as dominant as Prepaid was before. So for Shapers, I also think that Haley's fantastically positioned. So this is the Spy Camera deck. If you haven't seen this deck, definitely jump on Jinteki and play some games with it because it's hilarious. The idea being you can use Replicator to copy your hardware. You can use Bazaar to install it. So you can get all 6 spy cameras out for 1 click. And if you have your Haley ability up, you also can install your your hoppers or your clone ships for the same click. And that gives you a million tech rider triggers, it gives you a million tech trader triggers, and you just kind of roll over them late game. The amount of cash this deck can generate is huge, and you can kind of just run through their ice with Pancha, Sharpshooter, or your Atman and not really pay anything, or even net money on your run, which is pretty funny. So a problem this deck did have was people rushing it out really hard. So we had Clot, and it was sometimes good enough, and you could late game, you could lock them out. But now that, you know, NEH has taken a beating, we may again make this a vamp, or you could spend some on other fun stuff. You could play a second political operative, you could play Crescentus. There's really a lot of good uses for this extra 2 influence that you could play with. So I think this deck is also extremely strong against the field post changes. And there's even prepaid voice pad. Like, you can kind of bring this back a little bit. The problem with it in the first place was you didn't have the influence left after paying for your prepaids and your lady and your clone chip. But again, if we can get away without playing Clot, then you can get your Lucky Find back again. You can play Dan's card, which is an event that's going to get you discount. So with a spread like this and Turning Wheel, you can probably actually play Prepaids again. And I think it's going to be just as good as before in terms of the kind of bursty plays you can do where you just get a ton of money out of nowhere and makers eye them or indexing them. Certainly Freedom Through Equality is a very, very good card for Prepaids. Like, you're happy to pay 3 for this normally in a normal deck, but if you can get it for 0 off your Prepaids, it's just amazing. This deck is going to beat, or sorry, this card is going to beat a lot of food decks that want to get you to 6 points and keep you on 6. Which I think most decks are going to be food decks in the future, now that Astro is nerfed. So there's a lot of great Shaper decks coming out here, and I think Shaper's just fantastically placed to play the long game against Glacier decks. They're going to be able to probably hold their own against Cerebral Imaging too. I could see 7-point combo coming back to some extent. So, but Shapers are well equipped to play Councilman or keep the Clot, whatever they need to do to beat those combo decks. And yeah, Anarch, I don't know. It's clearly a lot worse than it was before. Whether or not these can still do anything. I mean, Witcher's ability is a good ability. You still want to trash Adonis campaigns, you want to trash pads, whatever you want to do. Having this from turn 1 is still pretty powerful, but the Clone Tips were almost like a get-out-of-jail-free card in a lot of situations, so you'd be in a bit of trouble, but fortunately you could clone chip out a Parasite, or you could clone out your Breaker, or if the Swordsman got you, you could just clone your Faust back again. So it helped you a lot. Having 1 or 0 is going to make things more dangerous. You can be caught out more easily and have bad things happen to you. But I don't think it kills the deck completely. I think if you're a really good Wizard pilot, you still have a way to go. So that's my quick thoughts just from having to look at it. I'm pretty happy that Damon is making big changes to the game. Like, it is called a living card game, right? So if you just don't do anything to the game, after a while it can start to get stagnant, or at least feel stagnant. And people that have been playing for years start to see, you know, the same things happen over and over again. Like, how many games have I lost to Astro just chaining out? Or won as playing an Astro, just, you know, my opponent couldn't get going fast enough to stop me from just scoring Astros all day. So I think we're in for a new era of Netrunner. It's going to shake up gameplay a lot. I would say to a greater extent than the first Most Wanted listed. This Astro change has both the immediate effect on NEH, and then it has ripple effects on every other deck in the game. Both of what runners are going to be coming prepared for, and then what Corpse can do to counteract the new runners, right? So it just ripples through everything. And I'm curious to see what happens. So thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned, I'll do a second video on the Corp changes.